If you've been a nurse for over 10 years, but you still feel invisible, like you've almost nothing to show for all the years you've spent bedside, and especially if you feel like those more senior positions that allow you to earn more and be more fulfilled are not within your reach despite your experience, I'm here to tell you it's not your fault. It's just that your wins aren't documented where panels actually look. Panels don't reward humility. They reward cold, hard evidence. And to them, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. How many times a day do we say that at work? You wouldn't give a drug and then purposely not sign for it, right? You write it down, you make sure it's there. So why are you doing that with your career? Giving your all with nothing to show for it. So this video is for mid-career nurses based in Australia and New Zealand who are reliable workers, the type of people who keep the ward afloat. They're mentoring juniors, they're covering charge and holding it all together. But on paper, you're still just a mid-senior staff member RN capped at 100k a year, and I know that's probably less in New Zealand, when you know that you should be in a NUM or CNC educator or even embarking on nurse practitioner studies at this point, earning at least 140k and finally getting weekends and public holidays off with your family. That said, if you love bedside shifts, and we absolutely need those amazing bedside nurses in healthcare, they are the absolute lifeblood of the hospital, or if you're happy where you are, or if you actually thrive on sleazing your way up the ladder, then respectfully, this isn't for you. I'm only talking to the nurses who hate the current high pressure politics within the industry, who feel like bragging isn't in their DNA, and who don't want to feel like they need to play the game in order to have the career they deserve. I get it. You're exhausted from 12-hour shifts, juggling childcare, collapsing on the couch at night, telling yourself you'll update your resume tomorrow. I know that imposter loop, tweaking applications, not hitting submit, watching younger, more assertive and more confident masters prepared nurses leapfrog into the jobs you wanted. But here's the truth. Your career didn't stall because you're not good enough. It stalled because no one sees the skills you already use every single day. Once you package your wins into criteria-aligned evidence, you stop being invisible and you become unavoidable. That's why I'm making this video that shows the full A to Z of the leadership clarity system that I take my clients through, that me and multiple other nurses have used to help mid-career nurses step into leadership roles without politics, without burnout, and without selling their soul. I was personally able to use this exact system to go from bullied, burnt out, and on antidepressants to achieving a near perfect, for me, work-life balance, where I get to work in two totally different areas of nursing that fuel my passions and allow me greater flexibility to be there for my family. And I did that in just 6 months. But don't take my word for it. Take Julia, for example. Julia came to me feeling unsure of herself and unclear about her future direction. But after just 3 months of extensive support and guidance, she's grown in confidence, discovered her strengths, and even secured acting roles into higher level positions, something she never imagined possible until she was able to step into her potential. Now she's able to work in a normal hours role that works perfectly around her family as a grade 7 specialist nurse with huge job satisfaction, as she gets to be a part of the family journey that she just wasn't getting access to on the short stay unit where she worked before. And this is all from simply using the structured and integrated approach to improving not only her written materials that actually got her to the interviews, but getting her mindset shifted so that when she got to the interview, she could confidently showcase her talents and knowledge.
Hi Annette, I just wanted to leave a little video testimonial to let you know where I'm up to these days. Since starting the Flourish in Advance program and working with you, my confidence has grown quite a bit. I have opened myself up to new challenges, new experiences. I have done some acting nurse navigator roles, which have been absolutely incredible. I have done pediatrics, neonatal, learned so much and gained incredible experience that I didn't think that I would be able to do, let alone thrive in. I really feel like your Flourish in Advance program, your mentorship and your guidance has really boosted my self-confidence. It's really pushed me out of my comfort zone and really made me challenge myself and think about where can I add value and what will make me happy and where do I see myself in the future instead of limiting myself to where I think I should be right now. I'm loving the opportunity to act up. I recently just got offered another acting nurse navigator role, which is incredible. So I'll be in that for the next few months and I will enjoy every moment of that experience. And I just really want to say thank you so much for boosting me, for challenging me, for opening up my mind and helping me to see where I can bring value to others and to myself and to push me to go chase my goals and my dreams. So thank you very much. I wouldn't be here without you.
Or take Jenny. Jenny came to Australia from overseas, where she was already working at an advanced level, yet just couldn't understand why her robust experience and advanced qualifications were not getting her hired. She felt like she didn't know the rules of the game here and was working way below her education and skill level, thinking she just had to do her time, working just to make ends meet, and she just became really beaten down by it. But after only 3 months, Jenny was successful in attaining the advanced practice job she was fully qualified to do that had not been accessible to her simply because of the different hiring practices here that made her feel like she was no longer qualified to her level. And now she is able to work at her advanced level that she worked so hard to achieve, minus the sleaze, ass-kissing, and taking on pointless projects just to hope she would get noticed. Through providing direct practical support, such as sending her job ads that matched, helping her write and edit her application letters, reviewing her resume, and coaching her for interviews, all within the Australian context, Jenny's mindset on the experience of job hunting is forever changed. She now knows how to take lessons from each application attempt and move forward instead of spiraling into negativity. Now, these are just 2 of the multiple other nurses that have completely changed their careers for the better using the Leadership Clarity System. So to be clear, in this video, we'll cover exactly how mid to senior nurses like you can firstly document the leadership you've already been doing so panels can't ignore it. Secondly, break out of perfection paralysis so applications actually get submitted. And finally, position your experience so that your master's or postgrad courses or all those years of charge shift finally convert into interviews and high-paying offers. So if you're tired of being that nurse that doesn't get the recognition they deserve and you want a clear step-by-step campaign to a senior role within the next 12 or so months, this video is for you. So stick around and take some notes because we're going to go and dive in deep. So I get that if you're watching this right now, you're probably exhausted from 12-hour shifts, juggling childcare, collapsing on the couch at night, and possibly telling yourself, I'll update my resume tomorrow. But here's the truth. Your career isn't stagnant because you're not good enough. It's stagnant because no one sees the skill you already use every single day. Once you package your wins into criteria-aligned evidence, you stop being invisible and you become unavoidable. So what does this whole package entail? What's actually needed to essentially get a job? Okay, so before I go through the details in this course, I will share a little bit of background about why I do this and how this all came to be. So what I was finding actually, and I went through a bit of a rough patch myself, which I'll briefly touch on, but what we tend to do is when we walk into a shift, we go, oh, hey, how are you going? And they go, oh, I'm here, I'm surviving, and I just feel that's a real pattern with nurses. And typically it's because they tend to feel stuck. They're stuck by the unit they work in. They don't feel like they can progress upwards. They feel like it's too hard. They feel like they don't have time. And they've got all this amazing experience and it's all just in their head. And they're not able to formulate that into a plan to move their career forward. And essentially, if you feel stuck, you're just going to feel miserable, especially when you have really exceptionally good skills. So really what I found in my own experience of applying, well, there's 3 main elements to trying to get a new job. You need a resume. You might need a personal statement as well. So like a 2-page essay basically sometimes on how you fit the criteria of the job. And sometimes that can be just free written or it can be answering specific questions that are aligned on a criteria. There will be an interview, and intertwined with all of that is mindset. Mindset has to be on point from the beginning, right? Because if you're starting out on working on your resume and personal statement or your cover letter and practicing your interviews with a negative mindset, that's just going to come through in your real interview on the day. So that's the 3 things. And I just thought, we can break that down for people. And really, I found myself in a situation where I had to get out of a very, very toxic situation that I was in. So this picture of me in 2022, I was pretty... I actually looked quite unwell there. I wasn't unwell, but I was very downtrodden. I'd been on antidepressants for about 5 months at this point. I was on a secondment. Thankfully, I'd gone to a really nice secondment in a job that I loved with an amazing team. But prior to that, I had essentially been bullied out of the place I was working in the job that I really, really enjoyed, just through some very toxic personalities. And I talk a bit more about that in a separate video because... I think the main element of that for me that I always remember is how I was able to get out of that situation and into this job that I was in early 2022, despite having been really downtrodden by people and the organization I was working with at the time. because I was fairly lucky that I had those skills at baseline. I already had skills of being able to put together an application and being able to interview well, despite my mind being in a bit of a mess. So I don't look very healthy there, but I was literally 2 months away from being in my current situation now. I was 2 months away from getting, 2 amazing new positions in very different jobs, and that's my current work-life balance now, and it's really, really great. So one of those, I wish I could tell her that this was all going to work out soon, but that's where I was at. And really, I felt like I know I had done this informally for people in the past, helped them through applications and proofread things. So I wanted to help people because I was noticing more and more people struggling with a toxic environment at work. So some of the barriers to applying that I'm showing here, and this is not all of them, you might be able to think of more, but there are a lot. And the top 2 are really essential to think about as nurses when we think about we're in shift work, right? So time and effort. So especially when you're doing 12-hour shifts, night shifts, weekends, you don't feel like you have enough time for life, let alone sitting and talking about your work. And if you've been in a job for 10 plus years, the chances are, and I'm saying this because it's what I mostly see, the chances are that you haven't documented your experience and all of your wins and all of your amazing qualities and even if it seems small to you at the time, those little interactions, so leading an in-service, for example, or being a champion, or doing the quality improvement that got you through your accreditation on your ward, like these things. The problem with nurses is we see this as all just part of the job. Well, of course I do that, it's just part of the job. Yes, it is, but you still need to showcase it. And when you're at an interview, they're not going to be saying, do you have a nursing qualification, because you wouldn't be in the interview if you didn't. They want you to actually showcase why you should get the job over other people. So if you haven't written it down, you're not going to talk about it. And if you don't talk about it, then they don't know about it. Overwhelm. So the thought of putting in the time and the effort into doing that is overwhelming for many people. And a lot of people just find that it's just easier to stay where they are. They also might be overwhelmed at the thought of doing interviews. I mean, 20 years ago, pretty much you qualified as a nurse and you just waited for your job to be handed to you. It's not like that anymore. We're competing against one another. It's high-level interviews, it's critical thinking, and, not through any fault of your own. If you're of a certain generation, then you didn't do that. And if you're now at the point where you want to progress, the overwhelm over now having to answer these, high-level questions with critical thinking intertwined and providing examples, and also having in your mind the sustainability and the funding and the management structure is really hard and overwhelming. As a result of that, most people, therefore, as a knock-on effect, have a lack of confidence. So they just keep telling themselves they can't do it. And the more you tell yourself that, the more your brain believes it. So the brain works in an amazing way. If it keeps hearing you say something, that will become the truth. So having a lack of confidence is a massive, massive block for most nurses who are willing to progress, who want to progress, but just say that they can't. Many nurses want to progress but aren't sure where to go, and there's so many options. And that's kind of a double-edged sword of nursing. There are so many options, but at the same time, sometimes there's too much choice and you don't know what you want to do. But what I would say is there's nothing wrong with trying out an area. Just remember, if you apply for a job and get the job, you are not chained to it for the rest of your career. You can move, you can leave. And that's totally fine. It only adds to your experience. So my awful experience that I had was with the people, the job I loved. And I talk about that job a lot still because I learned so much, and I will always retain that information. And I always still use the stuff that I used in that job in my other 2 jobs I have now. Past bad experience, yep, I've been there. But again, I've been there in a toxic environment. But you might have had a bad interview. You might have gone in and completely frozen. You might have burst into tears. I've spoken to people who have said both of these things. They come out of the interview and then suddenly all the answers that they were hoping would come to them in the middle of the interview just didn't. And they gave some either waffly answer or they didn't answer. And therefore they got marked down. And it's very frustrating when you then come out and you relax and you go, oh God, I knew the answer to that question. So a past experience, of course you don't want to have another bad experience. Why would you put yourself into that experience, right? So therefore you have a bad experience, you don't want to do it again. Overthinking and negative thinking kind of closely intertwined. Again, I've spoken in some of my other videos about how we're so good at being present and, able to deal with unexpected, code blues and unexpected admissions and deteriorations on the ward. Yet we overthink a job application to the most ridiculous level that we don't even put in the application because it's not perfect. when you're on a ward and in a deteriorating situation, that's not a perfect situation, is it? But you don't get to plan it all out. But you still, 9 times out of 10, you do get to the end result being a positive one. With this, people tend to overthink the whole scenario. So what am I going to write? What if that's not relevant? What if, they don't like what I've done? What if they know someone that knows me and they think I was bad? What if, it's all the what ifs. And negative thinking comes with overthinking, right? So if we're overthinking, we tend to overthink negatives. So that's why they go so hand in hand. And again, as I said, if you're negative thinking and you keep negative thinking, your brain is just going to believe that that's the truth. The last one is nerves and stress response. Some people genuinely get quite an acute physical response when they're in a high pressure situation, right? So heart palpitations, sweaty palms, stammering, feeling nauseous. It's just really hard for some people to overcome those. And they might be a really great candidate, but as soon as they step into that high pressure situation, they just can't get out of it. So these are a lot of barriers that people find, particularly in nursing, that people find stop them from progressing or even applying to progress in their career. So what the leadership clarity system does, and what I take my clients through, is a mindset and confidence formula. So like I said, that has to start from the absolute beginning. That's not a tag on at the end. Throughout the whole process, whilst we're working on your application strategy and your interview questions, we are working on mindset and confidence from the beginning. And that really starts out from knowing who you are as a person and knowing who you are as a nurse. So we cannot escape that. There will be a question on, why do you think you're the best person for this job? Why did you want to do this job? Usually that's the first one. And if you can't answer that and you struggle to even know that yourself, you are really going to struggle to answer the next questions, which will be, name a time when you've encountered a problem and solved the problem, or how would you deal with this kind of deterioration, or how would you deal with this difficult family member, or whatever it is. If you can't say who you are and why you're here in this job, in this interview, trying to get this job, the chances are you're not going to be able to do the rest of it, okay? So mindset is huge. So I've talked a bit about perfection paralysis in some of my videos before. So when we're talking about the mindset and confidence formula, that is where it starts, right? Is you need to stop waiting for perfection. So the perfect time, the perfect job, the perfect resume, being perfect at your current job. If you keep waiting for that, it will literally never happen. Also, panels don't want perfect. No one can expect to walk into any job. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, if you've done the job before, if you haven't done the job before. No one can expect to walk in being perfect. You should always go into every job with curiosity and the willingness to learn, the willingness to, make changes, the willingness to see things that others perhaps couldn't. But that is not perfection. That is using critical thinking, thinking on your feet, having more of a management head if that's what's relevant to the job, or having more of an advanced clinical head if that's what's more relevant to the job. These are things that we will develop over the course of our lives, but will never be perfect. So thinking that you can't apply it until things are perfect in some realm means that you will never, ever apply. Applying for a job and not getting it, and this is a big one, is actually not a waste of time. So a lot of people are like, but I'm so bad, what's the point? If I go for it and then I don't get it, I've just wasted my time. Well, actually, the most valuable job interviews are the ones that you don't get, because you get, hopefully, really good nuggets of feedback. And the interesting thing is sometimes people come up against that block where they ask for feedback and they say, oh, you were great, it's just someone else got it because they already had the job or they were more experienced. We really need to probe them for feedback. And I've done this before when I've had that same thing said to me, because essentially they just feel uncomfortable telling you what you did not so great. But if you say to them, look, I'm really keen to progress, and this was my first interview at this level, is there even one thing you can tell me that I could work on for my next interview? The chances are they will then tell you, but it's very easy to give you a cop-out answer. And look, some managers are great and they won't do that, but some will. Just really probe them, because getting that feedback, I've had feedback from sort of more negative feedback, let's say constructive, that has changed the way I went about interviews ever since. And it really helped me with my success. And this manager was excellent. She was just like, this bit was waffly, that bit was pointless, that went on too long, then you didn't talk enough about this. It was the best. And I was writing it out excitedly going, oh my God, this is so good, because I had clearly done this before, hadn't made any changes. And then finally someone was willing to just share the feedback. And I didn't feel like she was being nasty. I actually loved it. I took it on board and it was actually life-changing for me. So applying and not getting it is never a waste of time. and always try and get the feedback. You can't control that. If it's just a flat no, there wasn't any, you were great, then okay, then you just have to try and reflect on it yourself, right? But if you can get feedback, and try other panel members. Typically there might be 3 or 4 people on a panel for a senior, like a grade 7 job. See if you can approach one of the other people. They might have more time, they might be more willing to give you the feedback. Applying for a job that is not the exact one you want is also not a waste of time. Now, I'm not saying spit out a bunch of jobs to random jobs just to say you've done it, because if you can't picture yourself in that job in any way, shape or form whatsoever, excuse me, then there's no point. You're just not going to get it. I've done that. I applied for a job in theatres. Now, I think you've got to be a real special kind of person to work in theatres, and it's not me. But I applied for the job because I was a grad and I was like, I just need a job. I've been studying for 2 years and I'm about to embark on a master's. I've got a 4-year-old. I just need a job. And when I got the feedback, what they said was, your answers were really good, but they just weren't relevant to theatres. Like, you know, you talked about it, what we want to hear about is what you're going to do when someone's got their stomach open on the operating table, but you were talking about, you know, being an ED and someone deteriorating there. Not the same thing. So you have to be able to picture yourself there in some way. But if it's not exactly the one that you want, but it's pretty close, like it's the same job but in a different specialty, it's not a waste of time, because the questions will be very similar, because in certain organizations, they have to hit certain benchmark questions, right? They have to ask certain questions, they have to tick boxes, and that's how they do it. And certain nuances of the job, like parts of those in the questions are going to be different, like the scenario based stuff, what would you do if, that's going to be tailored to the actual position, but the values and why you're good for the job and all those, that kind of more fluffy stuff that they have to tick off that they've said, will be very similar. So it's never a waste of time. And who knows, I went for a job at a specialty that I didn't really think, I didn't have any experience in. It was dermatology and I was working in emergency, like you know, it's pretty different. But I went for it anyway, didn't get it initially. And then, but I merited when some hours came up. I then got offered a position and I actually loved it. So you just don't know. And like I said before, you're not chained to this job for the rest of your life or the rest of your career. Your mindset does really need to change though, from it's too hard to it will get easier the more I apply. It'll get easier the more you apply, because your resume will be more up to date or completely up to date, and all you're doing is little minor tweaks for each individual job. Your cover letter, your personal statement, if you need a personal statement, they will be up to date. And again, like I've done so many job applications with essentially the same personal statement where I've just deleted a few sentences to make it relevant to the next job. So once you have the guts of what you need, going on then, it's much quicker. The thought of going from having nothing, none of your skills and talents written down, to then having to do it all, yes, that's big and overwhelming. But like I said before, if you're not willing to do it, then you're not going to end up applying, right? So at some point, you just need to bite the bullet and sit down and work through how you're going to get all this stuff documented. And I'll touch back on that in a moment. So this is a testimonial that I often get, and this is an exact word for word one, but I often get a message from my clients, you know, a few days after that first call we've had. And what it usually says is, I just feel better that I'm already doing something. I've made the decision, I'm doing something about it, and that's really great. It's, as I've said in some of my other videos as well, like, you know, making the decision is sometimes the hardest part of this whole process, right? Because until then, you've just told yourself it's too hard, you're not good enough, all that other stuff. The point at which you make the decision and actually start doing it, and you get the help you need, or you know, whether that's you help from yourself, help from someone else by saying to your manager, hey, like, can you tell me what I'm good at? Can you think of projects I've worked on? Like, sometimes you just need someone else to say to you, yeah, you've done all this amazing stuff. But making the decision and actually starting to do it takes so much pressure off. It is a real good feeling, and it's one that you can ride, because then when you start to jot things down, again, once you start writing them out, they're going to come, other things are going to come to you much more easily, right? So your application strategy. So here's a few like key, like real tips for just the application process, okay? So every application needs to be tailored, and I'm so sorry, but there's no such thing as please do me a generic application, cover letter, resume, or all of the above that I can just send out to 10 different jobs and hope to get an interview. It's not going to happen. Every application needs to be tailored. And like I touched on, once you've got the meat of the first one done, you'll just be able to tweak it for the next one. But yes, every one of them has to be different, because they want to feel like they're the only job you're applying for. They know they're not. It's like when you're going on a date, like they don't want you thinking, oh, I'm just trying this person out until I, you know, meet the real one. Like that's not how it works. You know, they need to feel like you actually want to work there, and that this isn't just a practice run. It doesn't matter if it is a practice run. don't let them think it. And if you spit out generic applications that are not tailored to that specific job, you're not even going to get to the interview. Avoid fancy formatting. So the reason that's really important is most organizations these days use applicant tracking systems. So putting in fancy tables and columns and hopefully not, but I've seen it, flowers and all this kind of stuff actually confuses the applicant tracking system. And sometimes you might have the most amazing content in there, but it won't spit it through to the next stage. So, this is computer generated. This is, AI essentially going through the application and saying, does this person meet any of the criteria? So don't use fancy formatting, use normal text, underline things, sure, use bold, but don't use all the lines and boxes. And I know Microsoft Word has those templates, but actually they're not going to help you at all. Don't be afraid of high level positions. A big one for most nurses, we think that we're not good enough for that position yet. If you apply and you don't get to the interview, you can get feedback on your application and how to make it better. If you get through to the interview, you can get feedback on the interview and how to actually succeed in the next one. So don't be afraid. If you think it's too senior, sometimes maybe you really didn't have the experience, right? But that's a learning point, and that's where you can go back and say, right, I need to get more involved in auditing. I need to do more quality improvement. Again, use the interview or the application that didn't get through as actual data to improve your next stage of whatever you're going to apply for. We need to see actual examples of success in your application. So not just a list of responsibilities, like saying, I provide exceptional patient care and I do observations and I manage deteriorations and I lead the ward. That's obvious. That's so obvious. Well, of course you do. I wouldn't expect someone who's had 10 to 20 years of nursing experience to not do any of those things. So, responsibilities is not what they want. They want actual leadership, mentoring, education, quality improvement, all these things that tell us you're going to make our ward, our unit, our area, our division, and ultimately our organization better. They don't want, I'm just going to do the same thing I already do now, but with more money. That doesn't work for them. And actually it doesn't work for you because you won't succeed in the position. So what is the overall process that you need to go through when you're applying for a new job? So the first thing is you have to actually look for the job, so the job search. So think about what your interests and skills are. You're not going to be drawn to a job that you would hate to do. You're just not, okay? But this is where you need to know yourself and know the kind of nurse you are, right? So, typically people don't go, I love emergency, but I also love intensive care. I'm not saying there's anything wrong if you do, but typically they're extremely different. And most people don't. I do know people who have done both, but that's only something that you can know, right? So you need to just only look at things you could actually picture yourself doing. And like I say, you're not in it for life. Even if you don't like it further down the track, you can leave. So think about if you can even imagine yourself doing it, short term or long term, and how would the success in this position benefit your career? So, for example, a lot of education roles, if you've gone too specialized too soon, you can't then expect to get a job as an educator in a really generalized field, such as say emergency or gen med or something like that. If you've done, cardiology for 10 years, then you're going to need to get some more generalist experience, and that's just a fact. So it's really, if you want that generalist position, you're going to need to go and get some experience in it. So this is why you need to think about not only the kinds of jobs that you're drawn to, but how it would benefit your career. Again, if you don't want to be a generalist, there's no point going for a generalist job. The preparation is key. So once you have decided and maybe you have submitted an application, your next step is to actually speak to the recruiter and someone in the area or role. So I tend to do this personally once I know I've secured an interview, but it's actually, if you're a person who hasn't interviewed in a long time or hasn't applied for a job in a very long time, it would be beneficial to do it if you have time, because if it's due tomorrow, then you won't. But if you have time to actually speak to them beforehand to get the lay of the land on what the job actually entails. So more important, if you're really clueless about the job, but you think you might be able to give it a crack, speak to someone already in the role. Not only does it tell them that you're really serious about doing your best application and really trying for the job, but it gives you knowledge that you wouldn't have otherwise had. Things like, do you line manage anyone? For me, that was if anyone answers yes, I'm going to say, okay, thanks, but no thanks. So it's doing your own research as well as allowing them to see, look, you've come along and actually shown an interest in us and what we do. While you're preparing, and this is more talking about preparing for an interview, is having answers to common questions prepared. This is a big one that most people forget. So it sounds cheesy and it's are we still doing that? Yes, we are. The first question you're probably going to get asked is, why do you want to do this job? Why would you be the best candidate for this job? What experience and skills will you bring to this job? That's what you have to know. It's actually, we all roll our eyes at it, but it's probably the hardest question to answer because it's not cold, hard facts. It's you talking about yourself, which nurses tend to struggle with because we're meant to be humble and caring, and we're not corporate people, we're not cutthroat, we're not in a cutthroat industry, we are just here to serve and serve the public most of the time. So having that answer prepared is really important. And the way that you can have that answer prepared in a good way is to talk about how you've brought your experience back to the patient, the client, the family, the stakeholders, whatever they are and whoever they are. It's not about saying I'm great because and this is why I'm great. It's about saying I did this and it benefited this group of people, and ultimately that's what the organization wants to hear. Inquire about going in and meeting the team if you can. Again, it's nice to meet the team. It's also helpful to know what their roles are. It's helpful to even talk about them in the interview if it comes up, because you can almost trick the panel into thinking that you're already part of the team. Not everyone gets to, but if you can make the time, it is so worth doing. Again, for your own research and also for them to see that you're really serious about the job. Basics for an interview: dress smart. I mean, there's nothing worse than people coming in sneakers and jeans, and you want to be professional. Like I just said, I know we're not in corporate land, but we are still mostly public servants, and if we're not public servants, we still work in healthcare. We still have professional standards, and I think walking in looking scruffy, looking like you just rolled out of bed, is never a good look. Like, first impressions do count, and so dressing smart is an absolute no-brainer. Offering your hand or your elbow, I don't know, how bothered they are about COVID, but we should be polite and offer both and not force our hand out on people if they don't want to shake it, but make eye contact with them. Offer your hand or your elbow or whatever, and thank them for having you today. Oh, hello, I'm Annette. Thank you so much for having me today. And do that with each of the panel. It's a real icebreaker for you. For them as well, it's a good thing to do, but it will calm your nerves, because quite often then they might go, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, God, hot outside, isn't it? Or, oh, I like your coat. Or, do you want a glass of water? It's just an icebreaker. It gives you a few minutes to go, oh, you know what? The panel are just human beings as well. Yeah, they're not 4 robots sitting there analysing every single word. They are people, and I can talk to them and have an actual free conversation. If they've asked you for paperwork, then obviously have it with you. If you don't have it with you and they've written down, please bring your degree certificate, then it's going to look pretty bad if you don't have it. And always have a question prepared. I can't stress this enough. People go, oh, but what if I just don't have one? I don't care. You need a question. No one goes in knowing everything about the job. So you can't go, oh no, I've read your website, you've told me everything today, I've read the job description, I'm absolutely happy with everything. No, you're not. There's something you want to know. And don't just say, where will I be working Mondays and Thursdays? It needs to be a question that shows I'm committed to this job. I want to be here and I want to do a good job. So make it about development opportunities, and don't just say, what are the development opportunities? But you could ask it in a way that says, for example, a job at a university, is there an opportunity? Because I have lots of clinical connections in the hospitals. Do you connect with those people? And is that something I could utilize to enhance our, connection between the real world clinically and the university education? Something like that says, oh, wow, they're really thinking about this properly, not just a logistical question, and not just when's my day off, or, can I reduce my hours in 6 months' time? Because that doesn't tell them that you're looking to be great in the job. Okay, so interviews. If you've made the interview, then your resume and application has shone, right? So you're already through the first hurdle. So again, be prepared with your why answer. Why did you apply and why should we hire you? Also be prepared with your what answer. So what have you achieved? Again, going back to earlier, not a list of responsibilities, but things you've actually achieved. And I will talk about this in more detail in the next bit. Don't be afraid to pause and think, and let them know. It's really hard if you didn't hear the question properly, or you only heard the last word, and the last word was audit, and you start describing an audit you did. Well, actually, that you didn't hear the rest of the question. So it's okay to say, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that question? Because I didn't really take in the first bit. It's fine. You would do that in the real world, wouldn't you? If a doctor gives you like a 6-part order of things to do, and you just go and do the last one because that's what you remember, that's unacceptable. So it's totally fine to ask them to repeat the question. It's all right to paraphrase it back to them. Oh, can I just check that you're wanting to know what I did in between, like whatever it is. paraphrase it back, be clear, because what it shows them is that you actually want to answer the question really well and that you're not just going to fudge the first answer that comes into your head and get out the door. Check in verbally that you answered the question is also fine. So particularly if there's got two parts, and I've had to do that before, and I've said, did I get both parts that you were looking for there? You're not saying, was my answer correct? You're saying, did I get it? Because if you didn't, they'll go, oh, well, no, you answered the first bit, but you didn't answer the second bit. So the second bit was da, 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 da. And then you can move on and answer that. These are totally fine, and you do not get penalized for these. And like I say, in fact, if anything, it shows commitment to getting things right. It shows that you can talk. It shows that you're not as nervous. It shows a real integrity. You know, I want to answer the question correctly because this is your only chance. If you go out of the room and go, oh, I just thought of an amazing answer for that, they're not going to let you back in to give the amazing answer, right? Don't be afraid to write down as you go along. You can just let them know. Again, you don't get penalized. Oh, I've just got a notebook here just for making quick notes. Are you happy if I just jot things down as we go? I've never, ever come across anyone that's gone, no, that's unacceptable. It's completely fine. If that's how your brain works and you struggle to remember a verbal question, and these questions are usually quite long and wordy, it's completely fine to just jot down keywords if it helps you. And again, just let them know. Again, bringing all your achievements back to how they have helped people is not only going to be good for selling yourself and how you're going to be great at the job to the panel, but it's actually going to be, it means that you're going to be more likely to actually succeed, and it will make you feel more able to talk about yourself in a positive way, right? Because that's what you're bringing it back to. It brings you back to that mindset of, I am a public servant, I'm here to care for people, but I'm also showcasing, yes, what I've done, but how I've helped other people. So you really, really need those examples in there. So just to recap and go over how I've covered the three main pillars that nurses are missing. So documenting the leadership you've already been doing, breaking out of perfection paralysis, and positioning your experience to convert interviews into offers. So the first one, documenting the leadership you've already been doing. Like I've talked about, you need to have those quality improvement, mentoring, projects, presentations, and in-services, and anything else like that you've done on paper. It's as easy as having a notebook on hand to quickly jot things down. So I'm not talking a master's level essay. I'm talking short, sharp facts about what you actually did. You can pad them out later on, but the important thing is to get it written down. Have a small notebook in your pocket at work, because again, you go, oh, I did that great thing, I'll write it down later. And then after 12 hours, you're exhausted and you're like, I'll do it tomorrow. And again, it just keeps repeating itself. You forget, and then you move on. When you're documenting these achievements, use the STAR method. So situation, task, action, result, to frame them. So not just a story, right? Think of it as your SBAR handover. So this is a way of showcasing your skills. We do that every single day in handover. You can use any tool like STAR. It's like a quality improvement formulation. It's a way of presenting a quality improvement. So how was it bad? What did you do? And how did it end up? If you're already familiar with a different one, use that one. But if you're not, the good thing about STAR is it's easy to remember in high pressure situations such as interviews. So let's face it, simple, sharp, clear presentation during an interview is absolutely key to making the panel remember you above other high quality candidates. It also allows you to focus on outcomes. And as I just touched on, it makes it feel less braggy when you focus on the outcome that, was good for the patient or the family or the client or whatever it was. We do struggle with that as nurses. So bringing it back to result, the result is always about the client that you're serving. I've talked about breaking out of perfection paralysis. So that's the second pillar. So ensuring that applications actually get submitted. So just to reiterate, we cannot do a generic resume or cover letter that can just be sent to every job that you go for. It needs to be tailored to each one. So therefore, don't apply for 10 jobs at once. Many people get downtrodden and overwhelmed because they chucked out 20 generic applications and the ones that they just clicked on, only to then, unsurprisingly, not even make the interview to any of them. Well, that's a no-brainer, but that's also really hard to get all those emails, the constant rejections. Start with a job you think you'd like to do, that you can see yourself in, and prepare for that. Once your experiences are all showcased, again, as I've said, it will be so much easier over time to then make small tweaks to each application so that it's actually relevant to jobs that are different, but at a similar or identical level. So again, 2 CNC jobs, one's in respiratory and one's in cardiology, the values and the skills you need are going to be exactly the same. The clinical scenarios is only going to be what's different. The last one is positioning your experience. So any, master's or postgrad courses you've done, and if you haven't, that's fine. Those years of charge nurse shifts, Like, they are absolute gold and probably worth more than most masters, because that's the real clinical stuff. However, you need to get them converted into high paying offers as a result of your interview, and you can only do that by having it documented. Similarly, someone with a master's can't just show them the master's certificate and go hit the certificate and say, here, I'm great. They still have to position that master's. Okay, the difference is theirs is an educational process where they've got a certificate, and yours might be experience. Either way, if you haven't positioned them to line up with the criteria, you're not going to get a look in. Just please know that this is not a linear process. So all this work at the beginning, so starting to think about all your wins and starting to create a wins log from now on, is a strategy to overcome your self-doubt and your nerves in itself. Because interviewing is actually a skill that needs to be practiced. Otherwise, we lose it. Just like if we learn a foreign language and live in that country for a year, as soon as we leave and stop using it, we lose the vocabulary. It's a muscle memory, and it needs to be practiced. Again, utilize the STAR method, which is essential for framing your achievements in a non-braggy way that focuses on outcomes. You also need to be really clued up on the kind of job you're going for. So you've got, typically in nursing, you tend to be able to take a management pathway, so your NUM or your CNC. You need to be thinking like a business manager there, right? So KPIs, targets, audits, funding, all that kind of stuff, versus your clinical roles. So your nurse navigator, nurse educator. Some CNCs are a bit more on the floor, and that's something else you have to check. Some CNC jobs are basically like managers, and some are very focused on clinical activities, and some of them even have direct patient contact. You obviously need to know which one you're at, but you need to speak the language of the one you're in. It's no good going to a really managerial level job and talking all about the client outcomes, right? Yes, it's important, but they want to know that, do you understand the organizational processes? We do need those KPIs met. We do need to say why. If we haven't met them, we need to say why and what we're going to do about it. You need to understand that. You can't just say, oh, the family were really happy with it, because ultimately when this hospital or organization is getting audited externally, they're not, the family story is the most minuscule part of it. What they want to see is, did you have it written down that you actually met the criteria? That is also essential even in clinical roles. So the more senior you get, the more input you'll have into those managerial things like KPIs. But it just, again, this is why you need to go in and speak to people, because you need to know how much of the job is patient facing and how much of it is that kind of educational managerial. Get hold of potential interview questions and actually practice answering them out loud. Use the language of the job you're applying for, and again, find out from the job from someone that's already in it, if you possibly can. So practicing out loud, like reading something, doesn't trigger your brain in the same way that like saying it out loud does. When you say something out loud, it actually sinks into your brain better. It also allows you to find those little nuances you have, like ums and ahs, and if you start rubbing your hands and all these kinds of things, if you're just saying it in your head, you go, yeah, sounds good, sounds good, sounds good. And then when you go to say it, you'll just babble. So you need to practice answers to common questions. Just because you've practiced certain answers and those questions might not come up, it doesn't matter. You'll have so many examples in there. You'll have all of your stuff about patient outcomes in there. So even if the question is slightly different, it's not going to be that far off if you've done a bit of research. But if it is slightly different, you'll be able to adapt the answer you've given anyway, right? So that's why it's so important to find out about the job from someone already in it, and find out some potential interview questions. I've even said to the person in the job, what did you get asked in the interview? And they said, oh, these were the questions I got asked, Like, there's nothing wrong with that. They could go, oh, I can't tell you, it's a secret. Fine. When you are speaking in the interview, speak like you're already in the job and part of the team. So when you're saying, those, here's what I would do in this scenario kind of answers, use the colleague's name and job title. I would ask our social worker Tracy to come and to do whatever. It tricks the panel into seeing you as already part of the team, right? And again, if you've gone in and met people and actually explored their roles, then you're already way ahead of probably most other people, because a vast majority of people don't do that.